Welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinscoe. I'm an advisor, author, and general explorer of the service and experience space. My guests tend to have just released some interesting research. They run a company that has some interesting tech in the service and experience space. They are part of an organization that is doing some cool stuff, or they run their own business doing interesting things for both their customers and or their employees. That's enough from me. Let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Micah Solomon. Now, Micah is a customer service consultant, trainer, and author of 5 books on customer service and customer experience, and also somebody that I've known for a long time. And he's kind of like showing it up as we were on a video call, and he's holding up the book going whoop, whoop sort of thing. But remember, this is an audio recording, so... I've also known Micah for a long time. And so I would call him a friend in this space, a space friend, let's call it. And so, Micah, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm very well. So, Micah, I've done a bit of an intro, but I think it's always best to hear it from the horse's kind of mouth, as it were. So for our listeners who are not familiar with you and your work, can you tell us a bit about yourself and also a bit about the work that you do?
I am the guy, or one of the people who companies call when they want to become the Ritz-Carlton of screwdrivers or whatever, dog food selling and so forth, or banking. And I will tell you, I've gotten a lot of calls for make me the Ritz-Carlton of blah, or the Four Seasons of blah. And I've yet to have someone call me and say, hey, we're a hotel and we want you to turn us into the Citibank of hotels.
Right.
So I take a lot of lessons from hospitality, though I mostly work in other fields, which can be anything from healthcare to retail to all sorts of stuff.
Perfect. Nice. Now, so you mentioned that you'd written this new book, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today, because the book is called "Can Your Customer Service Do This?" ? With a subtitle of "Create an Anticipatory Customer Experience That Builds Loyalty Forever." Now, as I do with many authors that I speak to on the podcast, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the book, who's it for, what its main thesis, before we dive in to give people like a proper flavor of the book.
The thesis is, if you stick with me and you read the whole book, or actually just read the summaries at the end of the chapters, because I included some of those as well, that you will stop having pretty okay customer service and you will elevate it to what I call the third rung, which is exemplary, iconic, legendary customer service. And the reason you want to invest in doing that is because okay customer service isn't memorable. And in a commodified or commoditized, pick your one there, it's up to you, marketplace out there, you do want to be memorable.
Perfect. I mean, so that's clear. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to ask you a few questions about some things that just stood out for me in the book. And hopefully they'll give the people a bit of a flavor of your approach, your insights, but also some of the stuff that's in the book. And the first thing I wanted to do was to ask you, I mean, there's a thing in the book where you say you can be seen, or perhaps I should say sometimes not seen from time to time, spending a lot of time wearing a disguise and using a fake name. Why is that, Micah?
Well, usually I don't need to do that, but there is a picture in the book of what's apparently me in a Groucho Marx disguise. And what I do, and I don't do this for most businesses, but for businesses that are customers of mine, I will start out an engagement by trying to figure out their current state of customer service. Mm-hmm. So to do that, I mean, there's data involved and so forth, but there's also Micah and his team just getting a feel for how they're doing. So the problem is that sometimes I have seen a valet station and there's a wanted style 8.5 by 11 photocopy with my face on it. Like everyone, like treat this guy great, right? So that doesn't really give me a fair opinion. So sometimes I might use a name like Frank and Stein. You never know.
And so it's a little bit kind of like mystery shopping, kind of undercover boss, kind of all those things kind of blended together to get an honest appraisal or honest feel for kind of the experience or the service that you get, right?
Yeah, and I am one of these annoying people who has a complete knack for this. Like I will, and this is a true example. I'll mystery shop a 5-star hotel and everything will be great. I mean, everything. But I will see a cigarette butt under one of the risers on one of the steps, and I'll see it on my first day. And I'll just make a note of that, take a picture, and I'll see, does it go away? I mean, these spots should be checked more than once a day, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
And incredibly, it'll still be there on my last day. And there are just certain things that you tend to overlook if you don't figure out a system for making sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I think maybe kind of what you're kind of alluding to there is what something else you talked about in the book is this thing called kind of gold touch customer service. Now, I've heard of white glove customer service. I've heard of silver.
It's like, who wants someone to come in with white gloves? I mean, unless they're your proctologist, and then you probably especially don't want them to.
Well, indeed, or kind of it's like a museum curator or something, and you're not allowed to handle something. Yeah. But I've heard of kind of white glove service. I've heard of like silver service and things, but gold touch customer service. What's that? I mean, is that what you're talking about? That sort of thing that all these little kind of things are just eliminated because the culture and the systems and the processes are all pointed towards that?
No.
Okay, that's fine.
It's part of that, though. It's a technique. It's as opposed to other things which are philosophical. It's a technique. So you could call it gold touch. That's my name. You could also call it +1. So what gold touch or +1 customer service is striving to always add something extra.
Right.
Unless the customer's in a big hurry. That's my caveat. Sometimes people are in too much of a hurry to hear your whole spiel or whatever. But if the customer has the time, you try to add a +1 and it could, or a gold touch. And it can either be a do extra, which is kind of obvious, or it can be a tell extra. Right. So once you start thinking about this, you're adding extra value. Like let's talk about a tell extra. So let's say an applicant is coming in to apply, be interviewed for a job. Now, especially in our tight labor market, applicants are definitely customers in a sense, right? Mm-hmm. You have to treat them right. If you hire them, you got to treat them right if you don't hire them, because they know all the other potential people in the labor pool. So they email you and they say, what time should I show up? And you could say, the interview's at 8. Or you could give them a tell extra, which would be the interview's at 8. I would leave. The traffic can be kind of thorny and our parking lot's a little hard to navigate. And remember to bring your ID. I once forgot it, and the guard at the guard in our lobby is a real stickler. So that would be adding a tell extra. Now, you don't want to give them so much information, like these people attach like 85 PDFs and none of them have anything to do with you. You don't want it to become like that last scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark where there's a whole warehouse full of irrelevant material.
Right.
Well, a tell extra that you may notice at a 5-star hotel is if you ask how to get to the bistro or something, someone who works there will have actually dined at the bistro, and
right.
They'll say something like, but be sure to try out the mint milkshake. That's my favorite.
Okay.
So that would be a tell extra. A do extra is kind of more obvious. It's put in more effort than they might expect. I'll give you a great one. So Hamburg and Bremen are towns that are about an hour away on the train in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And I left my beloved headphones, my noise-canceling Apple headphones, at this wonderful hotel in Hamburg. And then I got to Bremen, and I realized this. And in, I think, 2 days, I was going to go on a overseas flight back home,
right?
Which, let me tell you, is so much better if I have my noise-canceling headphones. So I emailed the hotel back in Hamburg. And not only did they courier my, which was the only way to get them in time, courier my headphones to me, but they put it in like a nice box with paper on it and a letter from the head of housekeeping saying, "We look forward to welcoming you home, welcoming you back next time."
Nice. No, that's great when, and those things, because actually, like you say, okay is okay, but that becomes memorable, right? That sort of,
Exactly.
that little bit extra becomes kind of memorable.
Exactly. So okay, customer service is really important. I mean, you need to get the basics going, but just don't count on it to be enough to distinguish yourself. Now, maybe you distinguish yourself another way. Like we have a patent, right? That's a whole different thing. Or we have the only location in Bora Bora that is, I don't know, in the middle of the water or something. But if you don't have the ideal location, you don't have a unique product, then exceptional customer service is a way to differentiate yourself.
Yeah, sure. And the other thing I noticed on, or reflected on in the book, was kind of in a time where many books and probably the majority of things that are written about customer service and customer experience, they're dominated by a talk of technology. I mean, I think 2023 could be kind of subtitled the year of generative AI or the year of kind of chat GPT or something. But you talk about technology keeping it below eye level. And I wanted you to explain what you mean by that, because I think it's an important kind of point, something to think about.
Excellent. So by and large, your customer doesn't want to know about your technology, believe it or not. So think of the idea, well, think of an Apple store. It's not a real technological experience, right? Everything flows really well and you don't have to think about it a lot, except the beautiful technology that you are hopefully buying, right? The most simple and probably literal example of below eye level is you go into a hotel, even like a 2-star hotel, and you don't see. This is different. This is improved in recent years. The way they have the terminals set up is that the person working there can see them while continuing to make eye contact with the guest. So it'll have, let's say Donald Trump walks into your hotel, and it'll have on the screen, Melania likes, Melania likes Pepsi, but Stormy likes Diet Pepsi. And it'll all be on the screen, but the guest doesn't have to. Hypothetical example, guys.
Yeah. Don't shoot him down.
I don't have any insider knowledge. But it'll have all that information. But the guest coming in doesn't need to be troubled with that. They just think they're working with an empathetic person who's making eye contact. So that's a very literal example of below eye level. Now, the exception to below eye level is self-service. And a lot of people want to do self-service these days. I mean, maybe even most people. So they have to be interacting with your technology, but it doesn't really need to feel like it, right? It can be very well designed.
So I think I think the thing that I take from that is that with all of that sort of stuff is to be intentional in how you use this. I mean, it's always be intentional about what is the service you want to offer, what is the experience that you want to design and deliver, and think about how you want to use technology to use that. But it's like, so therefore the technology is not necessarily the star of the show. The star of the show, the service is the focus and the star of the show. The experience is the focus and the star of the show, and the technology plays its part. If you know what I mean.
Well put, Adrian. Can I use that in my next book? That's exactly right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you might be giving the technology the soliloquy in the in that particular kind of act, and it might be kind of a star for a little while, but it's not the whole story. And I think that's your kind of point. And it's being intentional about what it is that you want to deliver, and then using the technology appropriately, rather than just sticking it in there and expecting it to be the thing. And I think that's kind of short-sighted.
Right, and it can ruin it. I went to a hotel actually closer to you than to me, a hotel in London, and they were so proud. They had given all the employees tablets. And so they're coming up, and so the theory back at headquarters was the guest doesn't have to go to a specific place to get checked in. That was the theory. Because every one of these employees has this tablet and they can go to you. But what happened was the software is probably somewhat clunky and the employees hadn't learned how to use it very well. And so the entire time they're checking me in, they're staring down at it and it just was not an improvement to the experience.
Well, I think the other thing that comes that comes about it is the idea that if you walk into a hotel, well, unless you've been there before, you sort of don't know where to go. And if somebody comes running down the kind of out from kind of behind in through a door or whatever, kind of across the reception area and go with a tablet in their hand and goes like, wow. And then it's a bit like, I don't know, depending on your disposition, you might feel like you're going to get accosted by somebody. But at least if you've got almost like you've designed the space so it's obvious where people wanted to go, because there's almost, I guess, there's a little bit once you walk through a front door, unless you're given instructions about what to do with somebody who's managing the door, then do you know what to do? And I think that's sort of the thing. My favorite hotel story, which uses kind of like really old school technology, but very clever, was when I went to, this is years ago, I went to stay at the Four Seasons in Cairo for a friend's wedding. And I arrived late at night and the wedding's in July. So it's like properly hot. And so I arrived late at night, flew into the airport, got a cab down to the hotel, got there, arrived, and I was kind of hot, a bit sweaty, kind of thing, got my bags. And the person who was managing the door said, "Welcome to the Four Seasons. My name is such and such, and you are," and I said, "My name's Adrian Swinsko." He said, "Brilliant, Mr. Swinsko, can I take your bags? We'll have them ferried up to your room."
So he knew you were brilliant. That's good.
Yeah, well, thank you. But then he kind of like said, "Right, what I want you to do is if you just go up the stairs, turn right at the top of the stairs, go right down the end of the hall, the desk is just there, right?" But here's the thing. No, because it from a architecturally designed sort of perspective, it felt like a long walk, but it wasn't. It wasn't too bad. Up the stairs, turn right, go down there, and you'll see somebody on the desk. Here's the brilliant thing: is I did that, gave him the bags, walked up, turned right, walked down the hall a little bit, got to the desk, and somebody, as I approached, remember this is late at night, as I approached, somebody on the desk said, "Welcome, Mr. Swinsko. Here's the kind of form. All I need is your signature. We'll figure out the ID and the credit card kind of authorization and all that sort of stuff in the morning. Let's get you straight into your room and off to bed." And I'm a bit like, fantastic.
That's great.
Absolutely stellar. I mean, just the kind of those little things where somebody just had this thing. They introduce themselves to take your bags, you get your name, they call ahead, tell them who's coming, and it's all there. And it's done in a very slick and stylish and empathetic kind of way, because it's late at night. They're going like, get you straight up to your room. We'll sort everything out in the morning. And I just thought, wonderful.
Oh, that's great.
So we could trade kind of like hospitality stories probably all day, actually. But I wanted to kind of like ask another thing about the book, which sometimes this can be a little bit not controversial, but a little bit tricky for some people, because you talk about using humor suggestions, but also kind of innovation in customer service. But I wanted you to tell me a little bit more about the humor suggestions kind of bit, because some people trying to be funny are just not funny sort of thing. So what do you mean by using the humor suggestions?
Okay, so I don't recommend, in the book, I don't recommend you use humor. I say that as a customer myself, I enjoy humor. And I talk about how I was the dear departed Virgin America airline, and we were leaving late, and the pilot and the co-pilot came out and they said, "Don't worry, we're going to fly it like we stole it and get you home on time." Right? Or I think it was on JetBlue. I asked for some coffee and she said, "Well, I can go back and burn you a fresh pot." So I got all these things like that, and I enjoy them. I'm not sure I'm aware of anyone making a misstep, but that's my sense of humor. And my sense of humor and the service providers, they gel. But Like, what if you're just taking umbrage at my using Trump's philandering as an example, right? It's really risky. So at the end of that section, I say, do this at your own risk. Good luck, Buttercup.
Right. Okay.
So I'm not necessarily recommending this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the thing is a lot of it's about, for me, I think it's about, yeah, there are risks in it, but then if you have confidence in your employees and you've trained them well and they understand your brand and kind of what your brand stands for and all these different things, then hopefully the smart people will be able to read the room, as it were, in air quotes, and kind of understand kind of when to, say things and to choose what's the most appropriate way to kind of communicate and what's the most appropriate style in order to communicate with the people that's in front of them. And if if it feels like a risk, then it probably is a risk.
So one thing that is better and safer and probably more important than whether you use humor or not is if the guest is using humor or what they think is humor, you got to laugh. You got to pay attention. You can't be like, okay, well, let me move to the next part of my script, right?
Right.
So that's probably even more important. There is also the idea of customer service brand styles. So there are some kind of stores, like a Bose store, let's say in the airport. I don't know why I keep talking about headphones, but at a Bose store in the airport, it's probably fine to say no worries or no problem. But if you walked into, I don't know, the Ritz in Paris or in London, and you said, well, thank you so much for this bottle of water, and they said, oh, no problem, it would like be jarring. So there's also the idea of brand style.
Yeah. And so, I mean, maybe to bring all this together, because I know that there's a lot of different tips and ideas and talk about that. I mean, Micah, your books are always full of really great examples, but also practical things to do. But I want that can be real action plans and also inspiration for people, for brands that are reading the books. But I wondered if you could give me a couple of examples that you include in the book that you think that whose customer service is something that you particularly like, and tell me why you like them, what they've done, what makes them stand out, and sort of kind of like what that kind of means for them, just to kind of bring this whole old touch customer service or that anticipatory experience, kind of brings it to life.
Well, the examples I use in the book are of specific incidents. So one is that I have a salesperson, or whatever they call themselves these days. It used to be personal shopper at Nordstrom, and she does some much more important things than this. But springtime, I think it's springtime, when I least expect it, I will get a box of Girl Scout cookies. And it's not just a generic box. Somehow she knows that I like Thin Mints, and she writes it, and it's obvious that it's her handwriting. She probably had to, honest to God, pay for it out of her commissions. So that's a nice one. There is this is an extraordinary one. There's a cruise line called Seabourn Cruise Line, Seabourn. And it's ultra luxury. They're trying to be as much like a 5-star hotel on the high seas as possible. Okay. So one morning, there's a line of people getting off to do their shore excursion. I think this is during COVID, so there's a lot of little checking and stuff going on. But they're all going down the ramp, and it's a couple. It's a man and a woman in this case, and the woman, they're newlyweds, I think, and the woman is putting lotion on her hand as they go down the ramp. And if you saw me visually, you'll see I'm fiddling with my wedding ring as I tell you this. And terrible, terrible thing happens. Her wedding ring falls off into the water, and it is gone. It took one bounce off of the ramp and into the water, and it is gone. She is beside herself. Her very empathetic, still in their honeymoon phase, husband does his best to be nice to her. And the very empathetic crew members say, don't worry about it, Mrs. whatever it is, because she's a new Mrs. So they use Mrs. as much as possible. Don't worry about it, Mrs. blah, blah, blah. By the time you get back, we'll have all the insurance paperwork filled out. You'll just have to put an X by it, and everything will be okay. Go enjoy yourself on shore. Yeah, and good luck with that. And But the even bigger problem is, turns out it's an heirloom ring from her great, 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 great grandmother, whatever. And it is literally speaking irreplaceable. So this couple, they're good sports. They don't want to bum everyone out all day. So they do go on shore and they do their best to have a good day. When they come back at night, there's a voicemail. Remember voicemail? There's a voicemail on what we used to call cordless phones. Remember cordless phones? Mm-hmm. And it says, hi, blah, blah, blah. I'm the steward of blah, 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 blah. The captain would like to meet you after you're dressed for dinner. So this is one of those things they do. You can dress up for dinner. Mm-hmm. So it's they're kind of pretending that they're Downton Abbey or whatever. And, Americans in particular love that stuff. So they think, oh, great, we're going to meet with the captain. He's just going to say how sorry he is. He's just going to give us that paperwork that they talked about. But they're like, okay, we're good sports. We'll see. So they go, they visit the captain in, I think, a public space, not up on the bridge. And he says, well, I hear you had some excitement this morning. Not good word choice. Not ideal word choice. But they're like, yeah. And he said, well, I got something for you. And he hands her a box. What do you think was in the box? Another box. No, actually, if I were the captain, it might have been another box, but that's probably why they don't let me command these huge ships. In it was actually her ring. So what happened was these empathetic, energetic, empowered crew members that I talked about, the second the people went on shore, they're like, wedding ring overboard, wedding ring overboard. And they get in touch with their superiors, so-called superiors, right? As Sting said, so-called superiors, and their so-called superiors get in and blah, blah. And finally it gets up to the captain. And the captain knows all of the divers in the area, right? So he calls, as these stories always go, and I'm not sure this is exactly accurate, but as these stories go, he calls the first diving group and they say, come on, our schedule's and what are the odds? So they say no. Second one says, oh, we'd love to help you out, but we're in a different port today. Third one says, sure, we'll give it a try. And amazingly, like a needle in a haystack, the waters were calm that day and clear. And against all odds, they got the wedding ring back.
Wow, cool. Nice. I mean, that's kind of like over and above kind of like things, but like, that's kind of also, but and I guess that's kind of the thing that you're talking about really, is that it's that sort of thing that, okay, is table stakes, but it's not going to differentiate itself and it's not going to make yourself kind of like memorable. But actually, sometimes the memorable is that you talked about that kind of the +1 bit, these little kind of moments, but sometimes there's big moments. And the way that you capitalize on those big moments is having, I guess, the right sort of people and the right sort of culture that can sort of lean into that and see that as a thing that they want to do, but also as an opportunity as well. But it's also that because they want to do it because it's the right thing to do, if you know what I mean. And that's feels like it's a combination of the right sort of people, but also the right sort of culture. Is that fair?
All of that is true. So as far as the gold touch, when something has gone wrong or something's gone right, those are the moments that often you can really lean into the gold touch stuff. So I talked about something that went really wrong for me was the headphones being in the wrong city. So, but that was an opportunity for them to gold touch us. Mm-hmm. And this was something that had gone really, really wrong. But you need good bosses because it takes a lot of time. And maybe this time it didn't take that much time, but some of these things take time and they take you out of your regularly prescribed functional items on your to-do list. So if you get 3 fewer, light bulbs cleaned or whatever it is that your normal job is because you're helping out an employee. I mean, there's another story, a great story. Southwest, which had a lot of troubles this winter, I know, but by and large, they try to be a good airline domestically in the U.S. And so, true story, this is some years ago, but there is a member of the National Speakers Association, or there was, who was blind. And he had a service dog named Banner. And this kind of stuff happens in New York sometimes. They're walking through the airport and some other passenger said, "Oh, sir, I'm not sure you're aware of this, but your dog is bleeding." So what had happened was his dog got one of his paws partly run over by a taxi driver. Terrible, terrible. And this gentleman, being blind, didn't know it.
Right.
So at that point, one of the Southwest, I guess, gate agents runs over. He knows a little bit of first aid. They wrap it up. And then he and Banner get in the cab. I'm sure they took the speaker as well. Get in the cab and go to a veterinarian nearby and get it all taken care of. When they come back, of course, he's missed his flight. And at that point, they didn't even ask, but happily, turned out he is a Southwest passenger. So they got him on another Southwest flight. But, the airline has to be the kind of company where this gentleman, assuming he got his shift covered, which is, of course, important in aviation, was empowered to go do that and didn't get a hard time when he came back. And was probably a couple hours off of his usually prescribed functional items he was supposed to do that day.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's that kind of latitude because it sort of just matters. But I'd encourage people to kind of like, to check out the book because there's all sorts of stuff in there. It's like a goldmine of stories and hints and tips and anecdotes and all these different sort of things.
And what's the name of that book?
What, your book?
Yeah.
Oh,
that's the book I want them to check out.
Can your customer service do this?
That's it. And it's by Micah Solomon. And if you don't mind buying it from Voldemort, it is for sale front and center at Amazon.
But before I kind of zoom out and can ask you some wrap up questions, Micah, is there anything else that you'd like to add or highlight about the book that we've missed out, apart from the shameless plug that you've just kind of given us?
Well, that's the main thing. It's full of, we've been talking about some of the fun stuff, but it is full of, I spilled everything I know into this book. So I tell you how to set up a training experience, and I tell you how to do all sorts of things. I tell you how to write a survey, and I give an example of a good survey I wrote for one of my customers. So it's all in there. I just put all that stuff in there.
Nice. Excellent. So do check it out. But so couple of kind of wrap up things just to finish off. So drawing on your experience, Micah, which is vast, given the focus of this kind of like podcast, what would be your best advice to someone listening in that wants to improve their customer and or employee experience? Now, I'll help you. I'll get you started here.
Are you serious?
Yeah, no, sure. It's like, complete the sentence. Micah Solomon says, do this, ... What would that be?
So there's this old story in the Talmud, and I don't pretend I read the Talmud, but I've heard this story. I guess it's a famous story. And this really kind of too hyper young Talmudic student goes up to Hillel, who's the big rabbi, and he says, tell me the point of the Talmud while I'm standing on one foot. So Hillel says something like, love thy neighbor as yourself. Now go study. So the point is, I'm sorry, but it's not really a fair question. But I was going to say one thing. It's that you get, and you touched on this, you need to build a purpose-driven environment. Mm-hmm. So employees and bosses need to know what their purpose is. So like at the Mayo Clinic, which is one of our great healthcare organizations, it is the needs of the patient come first. Mm-hmm. At the Ritz-Carlton, they have several of these things, but one of them, which is probably my favorite, is to serve even the unexpressed needs and wishes of our guests. So you have the purpose, and then you look at if what you're doing, it fits that purpose. And at the moment in the airport, what would fit the purpose at most would be to bandage up poor Banner's foot and take poor Banner over to the veterinarian. So that's what you need. Once you get clear on this, your hiring will improve, your training will improve, and a wonderful thing that I call positive peer pressure will happen.
Yeah.
So we always think of peer pressure as something negative, right? You Brits sent us Sir Walter Raleigh, and he came and he, conspired with or enslaved the Indians or whatever he did, and figured out how to roll tobacco and put it in a barn. And then one teenager figured that out. And then all the other teenagers learned from that one teenager, if they didn't learn from Don Draper, right? And that's how everyone learned to smoke. So that's bad peer pressure. But there is also positive peer pressure. And positive peer pressure is when a new employee walks into an organization and realizes this is how things are done around here. And that can be totally negative, or it can be really positive. If you walk into an Apple store, and I haven't been into Apple stores near you, but an Apple store here, you get this feeling that the people who work there are not just good at technology, but they're empowered and they're encouraged, and they know the way they do things around there is to try to find a solution for you. And I have found that often the solutions they find don't make them any money, but they do keep a customer very loyal.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I know that myself. I mean, I've been, particularly in the Apple side of things, I've gone in there and asked for some help, and they're really helpful. And they've said, "Oh, you can get it here, but actually, you probably don't want to buy that. You want to buy it over there because it's cheaper and it's better." And you're like going, "Well, that's fair, you know." And yeah, it's not driven by you making kind of like money, but actually you've done something that you think makes sense for me. And I always remember those sort of little things. So I think the idea about getting clear on your purpose is absolutely right, and something I completely agree with, and something that I see as a miss in many organizations. I mean, people talk about having this kind of vision of what they want to do and this purpose of what they want to do, and they tell themselves that they do, but they don't. They have this statement sort of thing, but they don't really understand or don't really interrogate what that means for different parts of the organization, different people, different roles, and all these different things. And then think about what it takes for all those different folks and different roles.
Yeah. So you're
deliver that.
So you're touching on something that we haven't really talked about, which is there have to be all these systems to support all this. I say systems and smiles. You need both.
Yeah.
And so if you're purpose driven, then the people in IT will be purpose driven as well, and you will be inspired and encouraged to give suggestions for if things aren't working really well. And those suggestions will be listened to, hopefully in a systematic way, right? Mm-hmm. It's not, I mean, there's this cartoon I saw once, and there's the normal suggestion box on the wall, but instead it says career suicide. That's usually what happens if you put in a really too good suggestion. So, but instead of that, if it's an organization that really is looking for suggestions, then that'll be better.
Excellent. Right. So a couple more kind of questions before we wrap up, Micah. So these are ones that are a little bit fun, but it's like it adds to an ongoing series of questions that I've been doing.
Well, as with all humor, I'm the judge of whether it's fun or not, but let's go for it.
Okay, fine. But these two questions are related to the punk books that I wrote, the Punk CX and Punk XL. And the first one is, what one or two words would you use to describe a punk approach to customer experience? Now, I will tell you, I've been collecting words on this, words and phrases, and I have about 193 collected. Now, I do know I'm going to stop at 200 because I've been doing it for long enough, and it's kind of fine. And 200 feels like a right number. But I want the Micah Solomon Punk CX kind of phrase or word. What's it going to be?
So I did play in a punk band back in high school. And so what I would say about punk music is informal.
Ooh, let me just check. I am going to tell you, you shoots, he scores.
And what's another one? Maybe improvised. Let's go with informal and flexible.
And crumbs, flexible isn't on there either. So you get two. You're a twofer. Fantastic.
So either I won or I'm so far I left fielded.
No, that's kind of fine. They're crumbs. I had the most left field one I think I had was like Rainbow Mohawk. Which was related to a story that somebody could have told about their time spent in London around that sort of time of the kind of the punk era, and that it signified something for them because somebody had this mohawk and it was a rainbow color. But it was about individuality and things. But the second question is, what company or brand do you think is an experienced leader? Now, this is this idea that it isn't sufficient to talk about just customer service or customer experience in isolation. We have to think about it holistically. You talked about it's not just about smiles, it's systems and smiles and all of those different things. So what company or brand do you think is like setting the bar, is kind of like leading the way, is something that we should kind of like look up to or things? And tell me, what do you think?
Well, there's one that if you emulate, you just got to realize it's like emulating a moonshot, and that is Amazon.
Right.
Not my favorite company because they are great about the customers, but they are not good about their employees. So that's most companies are both on the best for customers list are also on the best places to work list. So they are an exception. So, but it's an extraordinary customer experience. And of course, there are pieces of it that you can pick off, right? Their technology is really below eye level, never gets in the way. Things like that. The importance of speed, right? The importance of real-time inventory, right? My wife went to I don't remember what she was buying, but it was from a traditional vendor, and it was on their website, and she hit purchase, and then she found out it wasn't in stock. Well, you can't do that anymore. You could do that before Amazon, right? But now we expect inventories to be
updated in real time.
Be realistic.
Yeah, perfect. So one final thing before we kind of go. Now, the world is a bit of a strange place, and it has been for the last kind of like few years. And I find myself getting up.
Come on, it's always been. We just weren't around to see it.
Yeah, maybe it's just kind of increasingly so. It's felt a bit weird. So I feel myself kind of like waking up in the morning and sort of doom scrolling a little bit. And so what I decided to do a few months ago is to end the podcast on a bit of a positive note and a good news story. So what I wanted to ask you, Micah, is like, tell me what's the most interesting, positive, or exciting thing that you've seen in the last week?
In the last week?
Yeah.
Well, my little Sheltie dog learned how to brush her own teeth. I swear. So she's very food oriented, and apparently the doggy toothpaste tastes really good. So that gets her into wanting to do it, but she grabs it. Now, I have the opposable thumb, so I have to help, but she feels like she's grabbing it with her little paw, and I'm just down here helping. And at first she just licked the toothbrush, but now she puts it on both sides of her mouth and she goes, so she really is cleaning her teeth. So that's the happiest thing I've seen happen lately. And if she's doing something completely different and I go like that, which is my, my sign language for, do you want to brush your teeth? She runs over and we do it.
A random, great story. You heard it here first, kind of like people. Micah's dog brushing its own teeth. Brilliant.
Email me if you want to know the brand and flavor of the doggy toothpaste.
And you can do that.
Which I got, by the way, which I ordered from Chewy, which is a fabulous company. Have you checked out Chewy yet? CHEWY. I don't know how big they are overseas, but here in the US, they are kind of dominating the e-commerce for pet lovers.
Right. Okay.
And it's surprising to me that they pulled this off because it seems like something that would be knocked off by Amazon, and probably eventually it will. But so far, they've really staked a claim for themselves.
Nice. Great. That's all. Micah, I just want to say thank you for sharing your time and your insight with us today. Congratulations on the 5th book and all of the other ones that preceded it. Thank you for kind of like adding a smile and some humor and a bit of insight to the podcast. That's been great.
Thank you so much, Adrian. What a treat. What a nice way to wake up in the morning.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. And do tune in again. Thanks very much.